Hello and welcome. This is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in this week's we have a Project Manager Part 1. We're going to be going over all the details of creating an amazing project manager. I can't wait to show you how this works, so let's get started. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me on this first part of the project manager. In fact, this is going to be a multi-part training. We got a lot of features, and of course I'm going to be taking your suggestions of what you would like to see in a project manager. So make sure you go ahead and comment down below what you would like to see. I've got the basics covered, but there is a lot more to have in this. In fact, in this particular project manager, when you select a project from the scheduler on the right, it'll show up all of its details on the left. And of course, if you want to add a new resource or an employee or staff or whatever you want to call it, we're calling them resources here, we can simply just select it, and with the drop down list quickly add that person. You'll see that automatically the schedule gets updated. I'm going to show you how to do all that, how to create new projects, how to put them on the schedule, how to color code them so that automatically the selected project shows up in orange. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Before we do, I want to make sure you are aware of my amazing dashboard masterclass. If you do like these trainings, please check out the dashboard masterclass. That is a 15-hour class for single-click dashboards. It's going to let you do 4 different financial reports, and it's an amazing template and blueprint that I've used to create amazing applications as well as customer jobs, many of those in the past. So I want to make sure that you get a look at that. I'll include the links down below, so please check that out. All right, moving on, we've got a lot to show you. The basic functions of this project manager, where we have the project information, project name, project type, start date, assigned. We have the ability to put a completed on date, the ability to assign 7 different resources, also known as employees or staff or however you like to call them, because you can create different types of resources, of course. We have the ability to add a duration. Now, whether that duration is days, hours, or weeks, you can quickly add it. So if we were to change this to, say, 1 week, this job, and we just automatically updated it, automatically updates on the schedule. So if we select this job and we want to add a day onto that, we just change it 6 and automatically a day is added on. Anywhere you select in that job, it's going to load. The job is automatically going, or I should say the project is automatically going to change the color to orange, so we know always the one that's been selected. So there's a lot of great features on this, and it's not very difficult to program. It's just a few formulas, some lines of code as we're going to go over, and of course an advanced filter. And it's pretty much made up of just 4 different sheets. So we have our project manager here, and as we always want to do, in case we have multi-user or for many reasons, separate our front end, what the user sees, to our back end, which is our database where our data is stored. In fact, this one's got 3 different data files. We've got a project list, and this is kind of a basic list. I really should update the look and feel of this. It's just a basic list, and I'll go ahead and do that while I'm working with you on that. So we'll update the look, but this is basically a list of all of our projects here. We have our resources. Now, our resources is just a list of resources. Now, we're going to probably add more information like scheduling, like availability, address. We've got so much more to add, but I just put in the names for right now, just a list of names. So I kept that pretty simple. That's, you could call them employees or staff or whatever you want, really. So automatically, and as we add items here, like as we add them, they're going to automatically appear in the project manager down here. So they get automatically added. So it's a really nice feature so that when you add them. We also have project resources. Now, this is basically the resources that are assigned to individual projects. For example, on project number 1, we have both Fred and Sally assigned to it. Project number 5, we have Leslie, we have Fred, and so this is how we keep track of who goes on what project, because we can have up to 5. So we want to create a separate database, a separate list for that. And of course, we're going to be filtering those. And then of course, like if we have a specific job that we're going to be filtering those results. So if we want to know everybody that's on job number 7, we're going to use an advanced filter. I'm going to walk you through that. So for example, the job that currently up here is project number 7 here, as you can see. So there are 2 people on it. So we did run an advanced filter, so we know how to get that. All right, so we just have those 3 databases. In fact, let me update this so it gets a nice look look and feel. Well, and also you can see how we did that. I'm going to pin this temporarily. We'll go ahead and merge and center this and increase the font to maybe 30. Just as we do, and then I'll change the font to maybe Cambria. Give it just so we can give it a little look and feel so that it matches this. But most of you know how we do this, so I don't do it too often because I want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But you can see how I did that. And we'll give it a, let's say, a green color, and then we'll use a fade. So I'm using 2 colors on the green from medium to medium light, and then I'll use the headers here, and we'll go ahead and give it 1 green down just so it looks a little bit nice. So you know how we do the fades, and I'll do a fill effect. And we'll use 2 different greens. We'll use a medium to light, and then of course the light green, and give it a nice fade effect. And you can do a lot more of this. We're going to be focused primarily not on the look and feel of this one, but mostly how it gets done. Because if you followed any of my trainings before, and we're getting near 100 of those, you'll see that on some of them I do cover the look and feel, and then other times we just focus on the internals of how things work. So sometimes I do them before. All right, so that gives you a little bit of an idea. So we've got our project list. Now, our project list, our database, of course, that contains our project number, which is vital and has to be unique for every project. So we've got a project number here. We've got a project name, a project type, and a start date. We have whether there's a status. We'll work on that a little bit in the future. In fact, maybe in the future we will color code based on status. That would be kind of nice. We can also color code maybe on project type, so we can color. Right now I kept them pretty simple. The projects are green color, but if we select them, they're orange. But I think in the future parts, maybe we're going to color based on either status or project type. So we have different colors for different project types. So I think that would be something nice. We also have a description, and then we have the duration and duration type. So 2 weeks, 2 days, or a few hours or something like that. And then we have duration days and end dates, and both of those are based on a formula. But these are based on formulas, and of course they're based on the number of duration and the duration type. So we want the total days, and what I do is I extract the days from whether weeks or days or hours, and then we also get an end date, and basically is the number of days plus the start on. Right? So if the start on is 20, we're going to finish on the end date on the 3rd. And that's basically just we're just adding D4, and I'll show you how we do that, adding D4 to the number of days. And then I've used an if statement here in the duration date. Let's zoom that in a little bit so you can see it. And so here we have the formula here. If I4 equals days, if it's days, then H4, then we're good to go with the number. But if it's weeks, we're going to multiply the number by 7. Obviously, there's 7 days in a week, and I want to get days. And then, of course, if it's number of hours, I want to do dividing. I want to divide because 1 day, if it's 1 day, it's 1/124th of a day. And if it's, of course, if it's 12 hours, it's going to be half a day. So we use that formula to pull the number of days, and that way we can easily allow the user to select between weeks, days, or hours. So this database for this project list is very simple, and we have data mapping here, and we're going to go over that. And we've got data mapping from columns A to I4, and I'm going to show you exactly how that works through the code. And of course, we've got our main screen, our project manager. Now we have the ability to add a project simply by clicking add a project, and if we want to assign, we can call this new website. If we're having a website company, and maybe we can call this new site as a type, and then we could give it a start date, let's say on the 2nd of January. I'll probably put a pop-up calendar here. I think it would make sense, but right now I have not. I just focus on that status, and let's just call it pending. And we don't want to give it a completed date. And we see that David and Mark both have times on their schedule, so we can assign it to David. And it's going to be a 3-day job, so we'll put in 3 days. And that's it. I also want to add in attachments in the future. This is just a space. It's not done yet. We're going to cover that. So I want the project to have multiple attachments and a preview. So I've added this space down here, but I've got a lot to show you, so I haven't added the attachments feature, and yeah, we'll do that in part 2 or part 3 or based on your suggestions. Okay, so we've got everything filled out that we need to fill out. Now all we need to do is click the Save Project, and you'll see right away it appears on the schedule. Now, of course, if we want to increase it, now that we save, if we want to change that to 5 days, all we need to do is just change it automatically, and it's increased automatically on the schedule. So that's a really great feature. I'm going to show you exactly how we did. We can also add a new person to it. Let's say it's a big job and we want to add, we see Mark has time in his schedule, so we can click on Mark and automatically Mark is added to it. We don't have to save it, we don't have to click anything, so it's automatically saved. New jobs, if it's a new project, we do have to save it for those changes because users may cancel, right? They may decide not to add it. But when it's an existing job, all we need to do is simply make the change. In fact, if we want to remove Mark, we just hit delete, and then automatically Mark is removed from the schedule. So it's these kinds of types of applications, once they get made, they're really easy to work with, really easy to use. So I can't wait to show you exactly how we did it. Of course, we have the ability to go previous month. I don't have any particular jobs on December. And of course, when we go previous month, we need to change the month and we need to change the year. So we also have the ability to change the year here by clicking it, but I haven't added in the ability. I could probably do that here on training. So the schedule doesn't update. Let's do that right now. On change of R2 or X2, we want the schedule to update. On a change of either one of these, we want to run a macro. Let's do that now because it's not working. I haven't added that in yet, so we'll do that right. So we're going to go into the Developers tab. If you don't have the Developers tab available, make sure you click on the File, and of course we'll click on Options, and then in the Customize ribbon, make sure that you have selected Developer to get yours. Alt F11 will also get you into the VBA, and you can click here, Visual Basic, to get you in there. We're going to focus on Project Manager. Now we've got a lot of code in here. I'm going to go that step by step with you, but let's add in just the code we talked about. We have a macro called Project Schedule Load. I'm going to show you how that works, and we'll go step by step through that macro. But right now, all I want to do is add a change event. Change event. And what kind of change? Well, that was R2. If we make a change, if the user makes a change to either R2 on sheet 1 or X2, R2 or X2, then I want to load the schedule. So let's just do that right now. So we can do if not, and that's auto hotkey that automatically type that R2, comma X2. If the user makes changes any one of those, then what? Then we're going to schedule load. Then we're going to run this particular macro, and that's going to refresh the schedule. Now when we head back into the schedule, and all we have to do is double click inside here, and it'll automatically update with the new information based on the date. So we can move ahead as we move to February or then back to January. So we can use previous and next month to update the schedule as well. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts and see just how we did that. We've got some more information to show you. I've got a few lists. One is which months, and I've had the months of January to December, and we've titled that, of course, month. So I've given that a named range as month. And of course, also years. Here we've got years from 2019 through 2030, and I've called that years. And then, of course, here in R2, I've given it a data validation here, and the data validation here, of course, is months here. And then, of course, here in the year, I've given that a data validation as years. So when you see the data validation here, that's going to be years. All right, so you've seen how we get the drop-down list, and now you've seen how we update the schedule. And so we have those named ranges. And of course, I've got the project load is false. Now, I want to differentiate when the project is loading. The loading means when I click here. When I click here, that's going to go to true real quick and back. And that's because I want to differentiate between the types of changes in these cells. For example, some change, this type of change I want saved, a test. So when I click this as a test, I want that type of change to save in the database. So when we look in number 10, we'll see that this is a test. It's been updated here in the database. But the type of change, of course, when we load a site, when we select a specific project to load, that, of course, it's not, that type of change is not. So we use project load, and I'll show you it in the code, but we use this true or false to differentiate between those changes. I also want to know if it's a new project or not, because if it's a new project, for example, when I click add project, this goes to true. So that means I know that if we make a change here, we're not going to save those changes to this database until the user clicks save, And of course, if they click cancel new, I want everything to go back to false. And we're going to just load a random, or probably the last specific project that was saved. We're going to load that. So we have those two things. So a new project. I also want to know the project row. And what is the project row? The project row, we're going to use match, and it's going to be based on the project number here. Project number is located in I4. So when we look at the project list, we're going to see projects here. And now I've given those a named range. Let's take a look in the formulas name manager and take a look at some of the named ranges that we have. We've got project name and we've got project number for this particular sheet. And when we tab over, we're going to see that this dynamic name range, and I'll zoom that in so you can see it. Okay, so that this dynamic named range is equal to A3, starting at A3. We're using off. Why are we using A3? A3 is the header, because when there's no data in here at all, it's not going to return an error when I include the header. But of course, the header is not part of our data, so we want to offset that one row down. If I were not to offset that, if I were just to keep that and we were to tab it out, we would see that it would now include the header. So we want to make sure that we offset it down. When we include the header, we want to offset it down one row. And I like to include the header because when we do that, no matter, even if there's no data, it's not going to return an error for this dynamic named range. And then we're going to count. Then we need to know how many rows in this offset. How many rows? We're going to use count, counting A3. We're going to use making sure that we count a column, in this case A, that always has a value. And of course, we're never going to enter a project without actually having a project number. So column A is always going to have a value. That's why we use column A. In fact, when I use the names, just in case somebody didn't add a name, I am still going to count column A. We're just going to use column B instead. And of course, because I've included the header row here as well, starting at A3, I also have to subtract 1 from that count. So we'd subtract 1. If we didn't, it would give us 1 too many rows. So then, of course, 1 is the offset there. And that is how we create the dynamic range. And we've done the same thing for project name. The project name here, we've done the same thing here, starting with B3 this time. And then if counting, we're still counting A3 through A99. We're still going to count the A's because column A always has a project number. So we want to use, but except this time we are going to start our offset, our named range in B3. So that is how, so we have project name and project number. So when I want to find a row, right, remember, keep in mind, these start on row, the first one is row 4. So if we find project 1, it's going to return 1. So we need to add 3 because we're looking for the row. I don't want the first one. I don't want the first row. I want the first value. The first value is in row 4. So when we use that match to locate the project row, we want to add 3. So for example, we're going to match. What are we matching? We're matching I4. That is the project number in I4. We are going to match it within the project number. That's the named range I just went over with you. And we want an exact match, so of course that is going to be 0. We're going to add 3 because our rows, our first value, our first project row starts on row 4, just as I showed you. And of course, if there is any kind of an error, if it's not found, or in case I4 is blank, such as on a new project, we want to return if error. We want a blank space, so we don't want any errors in that. So that is how we always have the selected month. VBA is going to change our month for us. And our next project number is going to use max. We're going to use max formula to see that. Now we know in our project list we have our project numbers 1 through 11. What if I want to find the next one? So when we add a new one, it becomes numerical and integral right after one or the other. So if I want my next one to be 12, I'm going to look for the max product, which in this case is 11, and then I'm going to add 1. That is going to get us 12. So I want to know, so when we add a project, I already know what project number to save because that's going to be 12 right here. In fact, again, it's going to be the max of the project numbers, the max of all of them, which in this case is 11, plus 1, which is 12. And of course, if there's an error, meaning there might be no data, if there's no data at all, I want to return, instead of an error, I want to return 1, as 1 being our first project number. So in case there's no error, in case there are no project numbers, we're going to return 1 instead. All right, so that is how we get to the formulas here on this. So that's pretty much all the hidden things that for the project manager sheet. Now we're going to move into the functionality of how we get this to work. We'll focus first on the project manager section, and then we'll move to the schedule. Now if we right click here, we've got some button sets. If you can see, there's a save project and a cancel new button. These two buttons are part of a group that I've named called new project group. And if we click on the selection pane here, we can see that this group is part of a cancel button and part of a save button. So part of that group is a new project, and I want this group only to show up for new projects. And if we cancel that, then I only want another group to show up called existing project group. This button is essentially just a button with some icons. I only want it to display when we're displaying an existing project, right? So that way the users can differentiate between the two modes. It's either an add new mode or it's an existing mode. And for the existing, we want to show the add project button. For the add new, we want to show two buttons: save, giving the user the ability to save, and a cancel new button. So basically it's just those two button sets. We're also going to have something called filter projects, and we're going to be able to filter by status and by project type. That's in the future. Right now I don't have that available, just to kind of put a spacer in there. And I will also have something, I've got a hidden column here for unassigned projects. I would like to show projects that have not been assigned. So we're going to add that in a little bit later on. Right now I've just put it kind of as a spacer, and I'm hiding it right now. So you can see that's kind of what I've got planned. So we have the ability to hide and show filters, but this is not active yet. So we'll keep them hidden for now, and we'll just focus on the main part of it, because we still have a lot to cover in this training. So I want to make sure to get you the most out of it without overwhelming you. And of course, we've got, this will probably be 2, 3, or probably a 4-part series, because there's a lot of features that we can add into a project manager. And of course, I have my own set of ideas, but I believe that you're going to add a lot more with your suggestions, with your comments and ideas. So I want to make sure that I hope I can get your ideas in as well without entirely redesigning this application. But I know there's a lot of things that can go into a project manager, so I want to make sure to add in as much as possible. Okay, so there's a macro that's run. When we add a new project, there's a macro that's run. And if we want to look to see what kind of macro, we can right click. And we don't want to right click the group essentially, but we want to right click at any individual component of that button. So when we right click that, we can see what macro has been assigned. Clicking the assign macro on right click, and we can see that there is a macro called project new. Let's go into that macro and take a look and see just what that involves. So when we click on the VBA and we go inside the VBA, and we have our module called project macros, and we double click on that, we see we have a macro called project new. Now, primarily, we're going to focus on sheet 1. So that's the most important, sheet 1. So we're going to just work within that. And of course, we want to set the project load to true, because when we do that, it allows us to do certain things without saving, without trying to save. And I'll show you why that later. But B2 must be true. We also want to set B3 to set project new to true as well. Okay, we want to make sure that the new project, we want to differentiate between the new and existing. So B3 is going to do that for us. And basically what I want to do is I want to clear out a whole set of fields. And make sure that when you clear out your fields, make sure that if you have a merged cell like this project description, when we clear that out, we must include all of the cells in that range. So that must mean D15 through I17. If I just try to clear out D15, it's going to give us a bug. If you've had this bug before, let me create that bug just so you can see what kind of bug would appear, just so you know. So if I take out D15, if I try to clear out just D15 and I exclude I17, you're going to run into this kind of bug right here. Cannot change part of a merged cell. So if you see that bug, it's because probably you have not included the last part of that merged cell. So make sure you have that full range. Now when you're adding a value, if you're adding a value, you just need D15. But when you're actually clearing it out, you need all of the cells in that merge cell. So you need to include all those. And of course, I want to clear out all of those fields so we can get ready. And of course, I want to then change those. When I create a new job, I want to do two things. I want to hide this button set right here called existing project group. I want to hide that. And I also want to show this group here, new project group. This group, I want to show that. So I want those two things to happen within the code, and I do that with just these two lines of code. Shapes, existing project group visible equals false, right? It's no longer an existing, so we're going to hide that group of shapes, and we're going to show the new project group. We're going to show this particular button set or new project group. We're going to show that with MSOC true. That's going to display it. And next up, we're just going to reset the project load to false. Now that we've made all the changes, and so we're going to set this to false. Now, why do we set B2 to true and then to false? Because in certain changes, when we, for example, in the project manager code, when we make certain changes, I want to save it. For an existing job, I want to take those changes and save it. For example, when we load project, or when we change resources, when we change something, we only do the following when B2 is false. Like, we're only going to load a project when B2 is false. So we want to make sure, or we're only going to save changes when B2 is false. Only changes saved. So that's why we set it to true and then back to false. And I'll go over this code with you in a moment, but I just wanted to show you how that works. All right, we have another one. It's very simple, called cancel new, and we'll go with that. Cancel new. When I click that cancel new button, what do I want to happen? Well, I just want to load a job, really. I don't want to be in this new state. I want to click cancel new, and I want to load job. Well, what job am I going to load? I'm going to probably load the last job. So I'm going to find the last job. In this case, it's 11. And I want to take 11 and I want to put it right here. Now, when I place that value here, automatically the job is going to load. So for example, if I change this to 10, automatically job 10 is going to load. If I change it to 8, automatically job 8 is going to load. So all I have to do is take 11 and put it right here, and it's going to automatically load it. And we're going to go over the loading the project. We're going to go over that macro very soon, but all I have to do is make a change into I4 for that to happen. And I'll show you how that is. So now when we go into the project manager, when you see here, load project on project number change, if not intersects I4, that is our project number, is nothing. And of course, B2 is false. We need to make sure, then run the macro project load. So that's how it does it. So when we use cancel, when I go into the cancel new macro, all I need to do is put in I4, and I need to put in the last value, the last this should not say job number, project number. It's kind of the same thing, though. You may call them jobs. Kind of depends on whatever your preference is. I've been calling them projects, so we'll keep with that. The last entered project number, which is basically column A of sheet 2. What is sheet 2? Sheet 2 is our project list. Sheet 2 is our project list. So what are we doing on that? Well, we're going to go to the last column with a value and enter that. So in that case, the last column with a value. In this case, right here, column A, the last value is here in row 13, which is 11. So basically on cancel new, we're going to take this 11 and we're going to place it right here, and that's going to load the job up. So when we click add project and I want to cancel new, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button, and if you look here into the assigned macro, you'll see that the project cancel new macro has been assigned to all the components of this group. So when I click it, all it's going to do is going to take 11 and put it right there. So if I did it manually, you'll see that automatically it's done. And that's all we're doing. So manually or automatically, all we're doing is taking the last one and putting it right there. All right, so we now have run the macros for the add new, which clears it out and sets the new project to true. We've covered that. We've covered the cancel new. Now let's do the macro that loads the project. When I load the project would be when I make a change here, or when I select a specific job from a project from here, it's going to load it, and all the details are going to come, and those details are going to come from two different tables. The first of which is going to be the project list. So we're going to load in all of the information here up to here. So we're going to add in the name, the project load. And we know what I've done is I've mapped them out. Now let me go over data mapping so it makes it easier for you. And I'm going to take a screenshot of this so you can see exactly how we do it so it's not confusing. I'm going to take a screenshot using Snagit, and we're going to go right to here, and I'm going to look at that, copy that over here. And I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it right back into this sheet here, just temporarily, just so you can see the mapping. Okay, now we see that bug fixes project name is E4, right? And I've put E4 right here. Now we see that project type is E6. Project type here, bug fixing here, project type E6. So basically I've taken the cells from where the data is and I've mapped it. So this way, when we load it up, when I load it up, all I'm going to do is I'm going to run through all of these columns here on row 1, and I'm going to take, let's say we're trying to load number 11. So what we're going to do is, all right, we're done with this, you get the point. Okay, so let's say I want to load this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go from here, starting here, and go all the way to here, not the last two because these are just calculated fields. So I'm going to go from column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 7 or 8. And I'm going to take whatever is here, and I'm going to put it right in E4 on this sheet. I'm going to put it right here in E4. I'm going to take whatever is in this and I'm going to put it in E6. I'm going to take whatever is here and put it in E8. So if you look at E8, you'll see E8 is right here. And when you're doing this mapping, I urge you to take a screenshot just like I did and paste it right here, and then double check, then add in your mapping right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a loop from all the way from 1 all the way to column I, and we're going to add in all, once we have our row, we know it's row 13, and all we need to do is add in this data all the way here and just into the individual fields right here. So we can do that with just a few lines of code. So that's what I'm going to do. The second part of it, I also want to load in all the assigned to, all of the resources. And we use a separate database. Now we know it's column 8, and we know our project resources are all located here. So what I really need to do is I need to find out where project 8 is. In fact, it's in row 10 and it's row 11. And I need to add in a criteria on an advanced filter, and I'm going to put that project number right here, and I'm going to take that criteria and I'm going to have the results here. I'm going to take all the results for project number 8, all the resources, and I'm going to put them right here. And then what I want to do is I want to take the name and I want to take the row. That's really important. For example, let's say I change, okay, let's take a look at project 8. Let's say in row 12 I have George here, but what if I change it, right? Row 12 I have George, but what if I want to change it? Let's find somebody to Fred Smith. So I want to change it, but I want to change it in the database too, automatically, right? How do I know? You see, now it's Fred Smith. How do I know exactly? Well, of course, I know the resources are always going to be in column B, but I don't know the row. But I do know the row because the row is taken from here, right? It's here, and then it's brought over to here. In my advanced filter results, it's brought over here, and then I do one more thing. I take this row here, because I know this is the original row, and I bring it and I put it right in here, but it's hidden. So if I highlight these and I change the font color to black, now you can see its row. So now when I make a change, I know exactly where to put it. I know it needs to go in row 12, and I know it needs to go in column B. So that's an easy way to change it. So if I change it right back to our George again, all I need to do is take B12 here and change the value to whatever we entered here. So it's automatically changed here. Then all I need to do is run the filter results again right here, and so there we go. Now I need to know, now it's automatically fixed, so I just need to run the schedule, refresh again, and it automatically refreshes. And so that's how it works. So if we run the advanced filter again, we see, here we go, it's automatically changed right here, automatically in the row always. So it's very important when we want to change data to bring the original row over. We know the original row, we use a formula. Why do we use a formula? Why don't we just put a number? Because in the future we may want to sort this list. So if we sort it, it's always going to be dynamic, the row. It's never going to be static as long as we use a formula. So we use a formula for that. So that's really important. So that's how we get that updated. And of course we use code to update it, but that's a quick way to automatically get those up. And of course, if we want to add a third person, now, for example, Here we have resources. We only have we only have row 10, but what if we add a third person? Well, we can add a new one down here if it's a brand new one in the code, and I'll show you. If there is no existing row, then we know it's a new row. So if I decide to add Fred now and I want to put 3 people on that, automatically Fred gets added down here. Automatically the new row is here. Where does that new row come? It comes right here. Now you see, now we have 3. Now we have 3. So when we reload the job, let's just reload it, refresh it a bit. Now we will see automatically we have now just those 3. Now we have 3. So it's really, really powerful. And I want to show you exactly how we do that. So loading the job, let's get into the macros for loading that job. Okay, back into the VBA, into the developer we go, so we can show you just how we did that. And also on project managers, now we're going to have something called project load. We want to load all the information into that. We're going to dimension the project row and the project column. We need to know those, and we're going to be primarily working with sheet 1, so we're going to use with sheet 1. Now of course we want to make sure that B4 is not empty. We must have a project row in order to proceed, and B4 is going to tell us if there's an accurate project row. If you remember, B4 is going to tell us our project row. We went over that, so that's important. If we don't have that, we can't really load anything, so we would have to exit out of that specific macro. So I've covered that. In fact, you can put a specific message box. I just put please select a correct project in case that. So that's important. So we need to exit out of that. The next step, we're going to set the project load to true. We went over that a few times. Project load B2 is going to be set to true. Next, I'm going to run macros called stop calculations. You've seen in the past my videos, and basically all that does is does 3 things. It enables the events to false, calculations go to manual, and the screen updating go to false. And the reason we do that is because we want the application to work a lot faster and the code to work a lot faster. So when those things are all turned off, then it works very quick. But we just want to make sure that we run the macro reset calculation, which does the exact opposite before the macro is done. So we do that. We got stop calculation. Of course, when the macro is done, we reset the calculation so that a calculation gets turned back on, screen updating on. Okay, so all right, we've set project load 2. Now what we're going to do is we need to know the project row. Of course, that project row is in B4, so that's important. We need to know what row we're working on. And next up, we're going to run that loop that I discussed. We're going to go from 1 to 9. And what are we going to do? Let's go over one more time because it gets a little bit confusing sometimes. 1 to 9. Here is the project list, and here is the column 1, column 2. So we're going to go all the way to column 9, which is right here. And we're going to take whatever is here, we're going to use that as the range. So in I4, we're going to put 11. In E4, we're going to put new website. In E6, we're going to put new site. And all of those ranges are right on this sheet. Okay, so all we have to do is run a specific loop from 1 to 9. So taking all these ranges from row 1 and putting those ranges, whatever's in the row 13 and that column 1 through 9, and bringing that into each individual cell here in the project manager. So we do just that with this few lines of code. So we're going to run our loops for project column equals 1 to 9. Now the range, what is the range? Well, the range is sheet 2, that is our project list, row 1, remember we know what's in row 1, the project column, so that could be 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 9. So this value right here, what is that? That value is E4, M4, E5, E6, or whatever it is. So those are the ranges. So we're going to say sheet 1, remember this is sheet 1 range. What is the range? It's E4, whatever it is. And whatever this value is going to be equal to the project row, project column value. So it's going to be equal to, so if we're loading 11, it's going to be equal to this, or equal to this, or equal to this. So we keep moving through that loop until we get to the last, which is row 9, which is column 9 here. So we run through all that and we place these values in their respective cells. Here, here, here. Not the assigned to. We're going to get to that in just a minute with the next part. So we're going to cover all of these because these come from a different table. So we're going to add in all these information, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9 is the project number. So we're going to run through all 9 of those and put them here. Next up, I need to run the macro that actually puts in this information. We've already cleared this information out. So what do we need to do? I need to take this project number and I need to run an advanced filter. And I need to put that project number right here. Then I need to determine the last row of our assigned project. In this case, it's 14. I need to take all of this data, use the criteria of project 8, and then I need the results of all that data to put here so that only project 8 results appear here. So then, of course, I need to just take the names and I take the rows and I put them right here and here. So that's how we do it. So let's go into the code and see just how we did that. All right, so we've done that. Now we need to load the assigned resource. So we've gone through the data and now we're going to load the assigned resource. And we're going to use a macro called project load resources, and it's right here. And it's just what I described to you. So we need the last resource row, dimension is long, and the last results row. What are those two things? Well, of course, in our resources, we have our last row as 14, and I also need to know the last row of our results, M. Because if that last row is less than 3, we need to exit out. That means there are no resources for that project. So I need to know the last row. That's very important. All right, so we need those two things, and I need the last row to run my advanced filter. So we need to dimension those two. Now, primarily with sheet 1, we are going to be focused. Now, what are we doing on sheet 1? Well, the first thing is I want to set the project load to true. We always do that as we make any changes because we don't want any kind of changes to save it back to the database when we're loading data in. And next up, I want to clear any particular data that might be in those cells, H6 through J12. H6 through J12 is right here. And so we just I want to clear this data out, H6 all the way to J12, clearing that out. So we want to clear that out before we load any new ones in. So that's that line of code. H3 value on sheet 4. Sheet 4 is our project resources. This is our project number and goes in the criteria. Our project number goes in and comes from I4. It comes from I4 of sheet 1 and it moves into, copies over to H3. And just as we reviewed it a minute ago, H3 is where we are going to have a project number. Of course, that project number comes right from I4. It comes right from here, I4, and we're going to bring that right here. And don't worry about these. These are for a different filter. We'll go over those on the scheduling aspect. And so we're going to bring that over, and that's it. That's all I need to do is run the criteria here and then bring in the results here. It doesn't matter regardless of any date. It doesn't matter. This is for a different filter. For scheduling, it's very important. These are dates. But for right now, all we're focused on criteria is the project number. All right, so continuing on, we now can clear any previous results. Sheet 4, L3 through R999, we're going to clear the results. That means I just want to clear any results here. I don't want anything to be here because I want all the new results to display here. So we need to clear that out with a line of code. Next up, the last row of our main sheet. I need to know the last row so that we can run our advanced filter. And of course, that is in column A. We just need to get the last row using column A here. In fact, in this case, the last row is 14. So we've gone through the advanced filters a lot, but you know, it's one of my favorite tools. It's fast, it works with a lot of data, so I use it a lot. Now that we have the last row, now we are ready to run our advanced filter. With sheet 4, of course, that's our project resource. Starting at A2, it must include the headers. G is our last column, and of course the last row. This is the main data here. We're going to run an advanced filter. Running the advanced filter here, we are going to copy. We are copying. What are we going to do? The first thing, we're going to copy that data. The second up, we're going to add criteria. And what is the criteria? It's just the job number, including the header, H2, H3. That is just the job number. We're going to copy all of the results to a range. Where are we going to copy it? All the way to L2 through R2. And unique, we can put this as false, just in case. Maybe we're going to have some very similar data. We can put it as false. So that's fine for now. So we are going to copy that information L2 to R2. That means all of the data, when we run it L2 all the way to R2. So we want that. So all I need to do is double click on here, enter it, and then our advanced filter is going to be run, and we have our results right here. Now we have those results. Now I'm ready to take that information and bring it back into, I've already cleared out the cells. Now I just have to bring it in here. And we can do that with just a line of code here. Next, we do have to check if for some reason the last results row here, L, we're going to get the last row of results. And of course, if the last row of the results is less than 3, then go to no data. What does that mean? That means that if for some reason the last row is less than 3, there's no data. There would be no data here. In this case, the last row is 5. So we just want to check there because we don't want to copy it over if there's nothing to copy over. All right, moving on. We continue now. Now we just need to copy our data. H6 through A12 of sheet 1 equals M3 through M9. That's just going to bring in the resource names. And then, of course, we need to bring in the resource rows. J, of course, those go in column J6 through J12 equals R3 through R9. And again, all that does is bring in the information from here and bringing it over to right here and right here. So now we've copied the information. Now we have the results there. So now we are ready. Now, in case there's no data we skipped here, we're going to set the project load to false. So we're done there. Now it's set up. And so that is how we set up. That's how we load the resources. And so continuing back, so we've got the load resources. And now on an existing job, remember, we want to show the existing group shapes and we want to hide the new ones. So we want to make sure that we run those 2 lines of code that hide those button shapes and show the ones that we want. We're going to set a new project to false. It's no longer a new project because we've just saved it. So we want to make sure that we set B3 to false. And of course, we can set the project load. It's no longer loading. We're done with it. B2 equals false. It's no longer loading. And end with is on sheet 1. And then reset the calculations so that we can turn automatic calculations back on and screen updating to true. So that's it. So that is it. I think we've covered we covered project new, project save. We need to cover that. Let's go ahead and cover project save now. And that is the macro to do that. Let's go ahead and go over that just so we see what happens when a project is saved. We'll add a new project and then we can call it website testing. And we'll just call it a simple job testing. And the start date, we can give it a start date on the 4th of January, 1/4, just so we can see it. We can assign it to Mark. And it's just going to take Mark 3 days to do it. He's kind of slow. What can I say about Mark? Maybe we should fire Mark, huh? What do you think? All right, so 3 days to do that, and we don't need to give it a status, no completed date. It's enough information, and we're going to save the project. There we go. Now it's going to start. Mark's now 3 days on this. If we select another project, we select back, we see that everything is saved and Mark has been put on that job. Okay, so that is what saving does. And when we save it, what do? We're going to take all the data that we've entered here, and here, and we're just going to bring it into the project list right here. We want to put it on the first available line here. The first available line is going to be the last row that has a value plus 1. And of course, we're going to assign it what job number we're going to assign it. We're going to assign it the project number here, which is the one we went over. It's going to be assigned that whatever's in B6, that is going to be the new project number. We're going to put that new project number right here. All the data is going to go here. What I'm going to do then is I've got some formulas here, and those formulas are located here and here. We went over those 2 formulas, so I'm going to take those 2 formulas, I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to paste them right here. And I'm going to paste those formulas here so that they automatically get activated based on the information. Actually, I don't think we use copy and paste. I think I just did the formulas actually in the VBA. Yeah, I did. So actually, we could copy. I did copy and paste them. You can try that. All right, let's continue on. Project save is what we're doing. We're focusing on the project save. That is the same macro that has been assigned to our project save button. That button appears when we click add a project. And if we right click this, click assign macro, we will see that the project save macro has been assigned to that button. So that's the button we're focused on. That is the macro, and we can move into that macro and see just what it entails. Again, we need a project row. That project row is very important. We need a project column as we're going to be moving through all the columns. we need the resource row and the project resource row as long. Those are going to come in handy. We need those. Primarily with sheet 1, we're going to be focused on. So first we're going to check for required fields. We do have some fields that need to be required. What are those fields? Well, right now I set it at project name, which I've created a conditional formatting so that it alerts the user that is required. And how did we create that conditional formatting? If we go into Home, Conditional Formatting, Manage Rules, it's a very simple rule. It says if the cell contains a blank, and of course I've applied that to H14, I14, and E4. So those these three cells are required. So in VBA, we're going to first run a check. If E4 is blank, if H14 or I14, if any of those three are blank, then I'll let the user know that those are required. If I try to save the project when they're blank, we're going to get a message box that says, please fill in the required fields. All right, so that lets the user know. So let's see how we did that in VBA, just with an OR statement. If range E4 is empty, or H14 is empty, or I14 is empty, then message box, please fill in the required fields. And of course, then we're going to stop the calculations, right? Because it's going to speed it up. We went through that macro already. We're going to set the project load to true. That's very important. And of course, I want to set the project row. We know the project row. What is it? It's going to be the first available row in our sheet 2. We went over that. Of course, it's the last row with a value here in sheet 2 plus 1, and that's going to give us our first available row. I4, that is our project number. I4 is equal to B6. Remember, B6 uses the max formula, and that's going to get us our first available project number. B6 right here, using the max plus 1, is going to give us our first available project number, so that they go sequentially. So we need to add that, and we're going to put that right in I4. We're going to put that project number right there into I4. All right, next up, what we're going to do is we're going to run another loop. Again, we have our data mapped out, so we're going to do that. Sheet 2, the project row. So we know the project row, we know the project columns are going to go from 1 through 9. It's going to be dynamic. 1 through 9, we're going to add in all the information. What are we going to add in? Well, what I want to do now is going to use the same data mapping, but this time we're going to work in opposite. I'm actually going to bring in. So what I want to know is, as we go through our loop 1 through 9 here, I'm going to say, whatever is in sheet 1 I4, put here. Whatever is in sheet 1 E4, put here. Whatever is in sheet 1 E6, put it right here, and so on and so forth. So that's exactly what we're going to do inside the code. So we know the project row, we know the project column equals what? Equals this range, column, dynamic column, row 1. So this value right here is a range. That range, what is that range? The range is E4, E6, E8, E10, and so on as we move forward. So that range, it equals whatever is in this range is going to go right here. So we run the loop, and that brings the data in from sheet 1 into sheet 2, right? Into sheet 2. So it goes through every column in the same row, and it pulls the data in. Basically, all we're doing is taking data from sheet 1 and bringing it into sheet 2 in a specific order in a specific cells. Okay, next up, we're going to copy the formulas. And I did here, the formulas here are going to be on the resources. We'll focus the formulas on the resources sheet. But those two formulas I showed you in J1 and K1, we're going to bring those down into the correct row. J1 and K1, I'm going to copy those down and bring those right into their respective row right here. We do that with just the lines of code. J1 through K1 copy, sheet 2, J and the project row through K and the project row, paste special, paste formulas. It's going to bring those formulas into the row. Those formulas are going to, this actually needs to be false here because we're done with that. Okay, so it's going to bring those formulas right into the current row, and then it's going to automatic, once we reset the calculations down here, then it's going to calculate those, and it's going to calculate the days, of course, for us, and of course it's going to calculate the end date based on the start date and based on the during date. So these are dynamic in this way. I like it dynamic. I like the formula here, so that if we automatically change this to 4, our duration days and our end date is automatically going to change. So that's really important. So when we change that, of course we'll change it right here in the actual in the days here. So if we change this to 2 weeks, automatically it gets shrunken. So it's automatically calculated based on that. So I like to keep the formulas here because they're always calculating. All right, so we've copied down the formulas. Now we need to save the resources. So we've saved all the job information. I've saved all of this information here, and we've put it in the project list, but put it in here in this first row here, last row. And now what I need to do is I need to take all this information and I need to save it, and I need to put it in right in here. Put it in right in here. So that's very important. So we need to do that with the following lines of code. For the resource row equals 6 to 12. Why are we going 6 to 12? Well, because we don't know what order. We're going to start here in 6 and go all the way to 12. So if they've added it, so they've added a resource here, we can still get to it. So we run a loop from 6 to 12, and we add in all the new information into the project resources into here. But I need to know the project number, I need to know the resource name, I need to know the project name. That's going to help us. The start date, the end date. Of course, what I want to do is these particular, in case these are formulas. Now, why are they formulas and not just, because if the project name changes, for example, if website testing, if project 12, right? Website testing, if that name changes, I want it to change here automatically. So if we change it, probably not here. If we change it to, let's see, website testing, we add an S on it, automatically I want that to change right here. So that's why we use a formula. So it's going to pull this project name from the original list. I don't want two same data, but I want them linked automatically so that I only need to change one. If I change one back here, I want it automatically changed in the resources too. So I want to make change back here. Same thing with the start date, same thing with the end date, all calculated based on a formula based on the original data in the project list. So that's really, really important. All right, moving on. So those are formulas that we're going to add in. Of course, we also have the row. What is the row of this? This is the resource name. I want to know the row of the resource. And that, of course, is B15. I want to know the row. That's important. So when we add them in here, they get added in. And I'll show you why that's important a little bit later on. So let's move ahead with the code. So, for example, if we need to make sure that H and the resource row is not empty. Why do we have to make sure? Well, I want to make sure that there actually is a value in column H. So it can't be empty. If it's empty, just, ignore it. So we want to make sure that as we continue with the code, it's not empty. Now the new row is going to be sheet 4, which is our project resource. That's the one we're focused on, sheet 4. It's going to be the last row with a value plus 1. So that's going to be our first available row. Next up, sheet 4A, of course, is going to be the project number. We're going to put the project number. That's the first thing that has to go. The next, of course, is the resource name. So now we're going to add in the resource name. And where's that? That's, of course, going to be H and the resource row. We want to put the name in there. The next up, as I showed you, those are all formulas. The next 4 columns contain formulas. 5 actually contain all formulas. And I'll show it's a little bit harder to see in here, but once you see them in the actual workbook itself here in the cell, it's a little bit easier. So if we look at it in the cell, we can see first if there's an error, we want it to show up blank. We don't want any errors to show up. We're going to index the project name. We're going to index that project name. And what row? We're going to find the row based on the project number. We're going to use a match to find this project number 12 and the project number. We're going to find it. Where are we looking? We're looking in the project list. So I want to find the 12 in the original project list. In this case, it's in row 14. So what I want to do is I want to index the project name, index it, find the row, and put it right in there. So that's basically it. We're using index and match to locate the project name, and we're going to place it right here. And of course, if there's an error, we're going to blank. And we've done the same thing using index match for the start date and the same thing for the end date. It's pulling all of that information from here, the start date and the end date. It's pulling it all from our original data, but using index match to pull it. And that way it's dynamic. So if it changes here, it changes in our list here. And of course, the resource row, we're going to be pulling that. I need to know the row of our resources. In this case, Mark is in row 7. Mark here is in row 7, so I want to pull it from our resource list. We're going to use index match right here as well. In fact, actually, we just need to use match. We don't need index because we're pulling it. We just need the row. All I want is the row, and we're using match. We're going to match, of course, B15, which is our resource name. We are going to add 2. Why are we adding 2? Because our resources start on row 3, so we must add rows. So if this returns 1, we need to add 2 so that we know that it's on row 3. And we'll show you why a little bit later on why that's important. And so we also, of course, have the row, and I showed you why that was important. So that's just a simple formula. So we're adding in all of these formulas here so that we can create dynamic information into the table. Okay, continuing on. Now I've shown you those formulas, and of course I want to set J, and I want to put the project row, the project resource row into J. That's very important because if we make a change, we need to know what row to update it. So that means I want to put right here into J the row that we added that information in. So when we make a change, if we make a change, we know exactly that it's row 14 that we need to make that change on. All right, so next up, we've covered that loop. That's how we save all the resources. We're going to set the project load to false. We're going to set the new project false, and of course, we're going to update our shapes accordingly. And of course, we are going to then run a macro called project schedule load. That's going to run our schedule. And I'm so excited to show you how that schedule works. Well, we've covered an hour, and I don't want you to get too bored, and I've got so much to show you next week. So we're going to cover all this. Of course, if you want to get this download, I'll include the links in the description below. It's free. Just go ahead and put your name and email, and we'll send it right to you. Of course, it's also available through Facebook Messenger through the links in the description down below. Thanks again for all your support. We've got a lot to cover, and we're going to cover scheduling next time. But of course, if you want to see what it looks like and how it works, it's fully functional. So go ahead and download it, and feel free to check it out. We'll cover the training on that next week. Thanks so much for joining me. Of course, if you do appreciate these trainings and like them, they'll be free every week. So of course, feel free to check out the dashboard course. That helps us keep things free each and every week for you and give you this training. Thank you so much, and have a great day.